Okay, boys and girls, today we're going to talk about the Burmester BC150 loudspeaker. It's big, it's expensive. Does it live up to the billing that might make you expect? We'll find out. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's talk about the Burmester BC150. I recently had the opportunity to do extensive listening with this speaker, and I was in some ways surprised by what I found, and in some ways it met my expectations, but I have some history with the Burmester brand, and maybe you don't, so I'll try to fill you in on that. Anyway, it's a big speaker. It's a little under 5 feet tall, 56 inches or so. It's quite deep, 2 feet roughly, 24 inches deep, and it's about a foot wide. So it's a big speaker. It weighs 400 pounds, 400 pounds each. These are large speakers. When you look at them, as you can see, it's very carefully styled speaker. It doesn't, to me, look like most other speakers because there's a lot of metalwork here. There's an aluminum casing around the top, and there are fins on the side that are actually the grill cloth for the woofer and the vent for the woofer. It's a reflex design. It's a 3+ way. I say that because it's got a 12-inch woofer, single 12-inch woofer, and mid-range driver and an air motion transformer tweeter, and this is the point something, there is an air motion transformer tweeter on the rear for a certain amount of ambience. Okay, so what's unusual about this? Well, that's the thing. It's like a lot of Burmester stuff. It's kind of hard to pin it down until you start to think about, wow, a lot of effort went into figuring out how do we construct something like this? For example, here's the over-the-top kind of engineering that Burmester puts into this speaker. The entire speaker is shrouded by 4 millimeters of steel coated in plastic. That's part of why it weighs 400 pounds, and we'll get to it in a little bit, but that might be part of why the bass performance is the bass performance that you get from the BC150. It's always hard to reason from the features of the speaker to the sound, so we want to be really careful with that. But nonetheless, Burmester is kind of going overboard on cabinet construction here, and there's bracing and all sorts of other details in how the product is designed. Another feature that isn't that unusual, but I thought was beneficial, is that there is a control for the ambience tweeter, so you can turn it all the way off, or you can turn it up to, I assume, approximately equal level to the front tweeter, and that allows you to dial in the speaker a little bit to your listening room. More on that in a moment too. Anyway, it's a big speaker. It's carefully and thoughtfully constructed. The drivers appear to be quite robust, and take a look at it and you'll see it's also been carefully crafted to work in a domestic listening environment where it's, I mean, you may like the style, you may not like the style, but it's very beautifully finished. And for a big speaker that's gonna show up in your room in a fairly big way, I think you might want this kind of finish level and attention to detail. Okay, so, but other than that, really we're talking about a big, carefully constructed 3-way speaker that costs $150,000. That's a lot of money. So now let's also reflect, there are other speakers In that same price range, I think of the Wilson Alex V, for example, that sound exceptional. And it's a little hard to figure out why the Alex V sounds so special when the speakers below that in the Wilson line are also very good. The same thing in the Magical line. In the M series, as you go up the line, you pick up performance, even though the performance of the lower models is really good. So, in Burmester's case, even though the speaker appears to be relatively simple, I was anxious to listen to it and see what it sounded like. We'll come back in a minute and I'll talk to you about sound quality because that's really the story here.
Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. As you may know, I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of The Absolute Sound. We have a new product. It's on the Substack platform, and we're going to do some interesting things with Substack. First of which is reader questions and answers. Each Monday, readers will submit questions. We'll pick the most interesting ones and we'll answer the questions on Friday. We'll also have early access to articles and special blogs that don't appear anywhere else. We hope you'll join us. It's only a cost of a cup of coffee per month. Just check on the screen or in the show notes below. Thanks, and now back to the show.
All right, as I said, we have what seems to be a conventional three-way speaker in a very big and very carefully engineered box. What does it sound like? Because at this price point, $150,000, it needs to be something special. I thought it was. Now, the gradations here, my reference speaker right now is the Magico A5. That's a $28,000 speaker. They sound very good. They do some exceptional things. I think they're wonderful speakers. You could make the argument that going up from there, or, pick almost any point in the price curve, you get diminishing marginal returns. Maybe. There's a long history of arguing about that, but I will say the Burmester BC150, to me, sounds exceptional, and that's compared to the other speakers I know of in this price class, which also sound exceptional. All right, so what is the BC150? Why is that the one you might pick if you actually were shopping in this price range? The thing about the BC150, to me, is that it pulls off a set of sonic contrasts that ordinarily form a trade-off. All right, let me give you an example. The BC150 pulls off the interesting contrast of sounding powerful and sounding delicate. Wow. Okay, but if you think about it, that's actually something that's in real music. And I thought that quality was super endearing and very desirable. It also pulls off an interesting contrast that I'm going to set up as thunderous but detailed. So a lot of times, especially in the bass, but I think a lot of what happens in the bass is actually going on at somewhat higher frequencies. You get the depth and the power in the bass, but you tend to, if you think about it, you often give up some detail in the bass, mid-bass especially, upper bass range. With this speaker, it's really not like that. You get, I don't want to say subterranean, it's kind of an overused term, but you get deep bass and detailed bass, and that's a hard combination to pull off. So it's this set of contrasts of being dynamic and poetic. It's like, wow, that's what I want. Because some music wants to be led by poetry, and some music wants to be led by dynamism, and there's some music where the two things come together and they're being interwoven by the composer or the songwriter or whoever's creating the music. And I found that ability to kind of do these two things and interweave them because they're actually present in a lot of music. This ability to pull off these contrasts to be really wonderful. It starts to make you think that the speaker really isn't getting in the way. It's giving you the music as it was recorded. That isn't quite true in my mind. There are times when the BC150 feels like it's in the circuit, but it's really kind of a minor musical event when it happens. On top of that, for such big speakers, the image is largely off the box. They throw a deep, deep, and quite wide soundstage that, strangely for my mind, doesn't distract you to thinking in the main that the sound is coming from the speakers. Now, there are recordings where the mixdown guy or the mastering engineer, probably the mix guy, throws a performer. This is particularly true with the older recordings, puts a recorder hard left, and he or she is supposed to be coming, I guess, from the left channel speaker or from the right channel speaker. I don't usually love the soundstage of those recordings, but they exist and they show up that way on the Burmester. There's no doing soundstage magic kind of thing here. It's the speakers are trying to present the recording. Anyway, so the speaker is doing relatively little to get in the way of the sound and is able to reveal these wonderful characteristics that are in a lot of recordings rather than kind of always emphasizing transparency or always emphasizing dynamic range or always doing sound staging, but maybe giving up quite a bit on the other factors. So when we say that some speakers are a good all-rounder, this really fits that category without being, damning with faint praise. It's quite the opposite of that. It's just an exceptional speaker in practically all regards. Now, I said there's kind of a Burmester thing, or in my mind, historically, for the last 20 years, there has kind of been a Burmester thing, and I think it's got two factors, and they're both present in the BC150, so I want to tell you about them. First of all, it's clearly a speaker where somebody paid a lot of attention to what was going on in the bass. Dieter Burmester was a bass player, and I think his legacy has been a whole series of products that went overboard on making sure that they could do bass well, and the BC150 fits into that legacy. And so the kind of subterranean thing that they can do, even though I don't love that word because I don't think it's really done with super low frequencies, but just that feeling of almost unlimited bass power is really a beautiful thing on the right kind of music. That combined with another thing that I'm starting to realize is a Burmester thing, which is the way they handle transients. The many Burmester products, or at least the ones I've listened to extensively, and it's certainly true of the BC150, are very good on the leading edge of a transient, but what's exceptional is then they quiet down right away. And that, I think, is how you partially get this system of contrasts where they do things that don't, in your head maybe, seem to go together, but in fact, in the output of, in this case, the BC150, is they do go together, and they go together beautifully because that's how a lot of real music is. So, did I enjoy listening to the BC150s? Absolutely yes. Do I think they're exceptional? Yes. I think they're exceptional in their way because they're in a price class where there are other really exceptional speakers, but I could easily see someone carefully listening to the available players and concluding that the BC150 is the right answer for them. I can easily imagine someone concluding that one of the other products in this price category is the right answer as well, because the people who are making speakers at this level they're just really good designers. And Burmester is easily in that category. I strongly suggest, if you're actually shopping in this price range, that you go listen to a pair. Their dealers are a little bit more rare than you might find with some other brands. The dealer that I went to do my listing, which was Safe and Sound in Chicopee, Massachusetts, has beautifully built listening rooms and a great setup to allow you to try different equipment with speakers. And if most Burmester dealers are set up that way, then you're going to be well taken care of. But enough of that. My point is, this is a speaker worth hearing if you're shopping in that price range. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I got to do this review. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you did, please subscribe. If you haven't subscribed already, please click on the notification bell so when we post new things. We've done over 100 videos in the last year, so there's plenty of material here, and we'd love to have you join us. Thanks.
Okay, so this is the BC150, which is the smaller brother of the BC350. BC350 retails at US 350,000. BC150 is 150,000 US dollars. It takes a fair amount of the aspects and features of the 350 and derives it into a smaller scale design. Okay, first of all, the construction, which is taken from the 350, is a solid aluminium frame, certain amount of MDF, but also inside this we have steel and specially designed plastic construction inside. It's a 4mm steel plate inside as well, which adds to rigidity and noise reduction and isolation. Like its bigger brother, we have a baffle with mid-range and ribbon tweeter from AMT and a side-firing bass unit. In this case, we've got the mid-range, the AMT tweeter here, which is a smaller version of the one on the 350, and on the rear we have a smaller AMT tweeter which works as almost like a dipole, but what it actually adds is an ambience to the sound. On the rear of the speaker there is a stepped attenuator which we designed ourselves, which actually gives you choice of leveling the flexibility of the tweeter. So it's in increments of 0 to 7, 0 being off, 7 being the most projection, shall we say, of this ambient effect. On the inside we have the inward firing 12-inch bass units, and on the outside we have a side-mounted port for the bass port, which actually adds a bit of scale and weight both sides of the speaker, as opposed to the more traditional bass unit on the front. This is also taken from the 350. Very high quality components in the crossover, incredibly high, including capacitors from Mundorf, and also inside the speaker the actual crossover is isolated in a suspended kind of enclosure, which further reduces any kind of distortion or vibration of the actual unit itself. Sound-wise, for a speaker that is not particularly huge, it's a very large-scale sound, very warm, very open, and thanks to the ambient tweeters, a very spacious three-dimensionality to the sound. Even when the tweeter is off, you still get this 3D sound. With the ambient tweeter on, it adds a bit of air, space, and lightness that creates a kind of, for me, a vibrant feel to the music and a feeling of air, which I think is really important to give like a live presentation of the music. Actual weight of them, they're significant. They're 400 pounds each because of this steel and aluminium construction. Another interesting thing to add is that it's small but significant, is that these panels here, at the bottom and the top of the grille here, can be bespoke finish. So if you have a favorite armchair leather, we can try and match it to that, you know, or we can have different colors, or we can have metal or chrome. Basically, whatever your desire, we can pretty much have a go at matching whatever you want as a bespoke interior design.
What about sensitivity?
Sensitivity is round about 88.5 or thereabouts, you know. Power handling very good. You can actually, I would say, we're using the Burmester 909 here, stereo power amp, which is a conservative 600 watts per channel. You can go anything. You could actually turn these into mono and give these 2,000 each side, which is what this can deliver. Likewise, you need an amplifier with a lot of current, a bit of power. You need a good 150, 200 watts really of decent juice, I would say, to power them to full effect. Yeah.
Can you go back for a second to the construction?
Yes.
What we see is not actually the steel and aluminium.
No,
support.
That's correct. What you see here.
This is a finish.
Yes, correct. This is actually the aluminium frame here as well on the outside. The steel is exactly correct. That's the steel is on the inside essentially as extra bracing. There's also aluminium rods inside for extra bracing as well as the steel. Correct.
Understood. And the mid-range driver, is that similar to, same as, different from the one on the BC150?
Yeah, it's exactly. It's slightly different, okay, in the fact that it's shall we say engineered down slightly, okay, but it's essentially made by the same people for us, and it has virtually the same modifications that you find in the 350. It's a very, very heavily modified unit actually, compared to what it would be from off the shelf from the manufacturer.
And then there's kind of a plinth on the bottom. Do these swivel,
Yes.
or is that standing element?
No, that's a standing element. On the 350s, they do swivel. Okay, that's the main difference. So on the 350, you can actually move this speaker and swivel on the actual podium itself. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay.